This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to all the teachers present here. My name is Dr. Smriti Sorte, Thane District Coordinator of IAPWC Thane District. Dr. Jayaganda Patil and Dr. Rima Ranga are the sub-coordinators of Thane District. I would like to share the journey of IAPWC till now with you all. IAPWC was started on 30th May 2018. It functions under the guidance of National Head Dr. Ruchi Vashni and IAP President Executive Dr. Sanjeev Jha. IAPWC work towards conducting public awareness programs, CMEs, workshops. It aims at bringing together all physiotherapy professionals for sharing knowledge and improving public awareness about physiotherapy. We have 5 zones in India with heads for each. Dr. Pooja Kamble is the West Zone head. The state team of IAPWC Maharashtra includes State Coordinator Dr. Suvarna Ganvir, Joint Coordinator Dr. Snehal Patel, and Sub-Coordinators Dr. Uttara Mohan, Dr. Priya Karande, and Dr. Nirali Sangvi. In Maharashtra, IAPWC has conducted 40 plus low-cost activities in various districts. In first corporate IAPWC conference in Indore in April 2019, Maharashtra State received award for the best state IAPWC. I take this opportunity to introduce our resource person, Dr. Gaurang Bakshi, to you all. Dr. Gaurang Bakshi is a professor and PhD guide at Dr. D.Y. Patil Vidyapit, Pune. He is also an additional director for the university Center for Professional Education and Faculty Development at Dr. D.Y. Patil Vidyapit, Pune. Dr. Gaurang is a fellow of Foundation of International Medical Education and Research, USA. He has served as an assistant managing editor of the International Journal Education for Health, the Journal of the Network Towards Unity for Health, and affiliate of the WHO from 2012 to 2016. He has more than 30 research publications. He is a certified international manual therapy teacher, a member of India Academy of Health Profession Education, and is also the treasurer of Pimpri-Chinchwad branch of the Indian Association of Physiotherapists. Thank you, sir, for coming as a resource person for today's webinar session. I would request Dr. Suvarna Ganvir, ma'am, Maharashtra State Coordinator, to say a few words. Ma'am, I pass over to you.
Thank you, Smriti. This person. Welcome, Dr. Gaurang, for this session on OSCE and OSPI. And I heartily welcome all the teachers, and I can see a lot of senior teachers attending this workshop. So I'm really happy that under the guidance of senior teachers, we, the junior teachers, would learn a lot. And this is the second webinar in the series of webinars for the teachers. So as you all know, the first webinar was on mechanics of question paper setting. And this OSCE and OSPI, probably every teacher is little scared of, and sometimes they wish to execute this OSCE and OSPI in their own setup, but probably they do not have much guidance or introduction about this. So we thought that let's have this introductory session on OSCE and OSPI for all teachers, so that if they wish, they can introduce in their own setups. So who can be a better person than Dr. Gaurang to share this particular innovation in medical education? So I request Dr. Gaurang to start with the proceeding. Dr. Gaurang, please.
Thank you, ma'am, and Ganvir ma'am, thanks to all the organizers for inviting me to So, can I share my screen now, please? Yeah. Okay, so welcome to this live webinar on Objective Structured Clinical Examination, that is OSCE, and OSPE, which stands for Objective Structured Practical Examination. So before I move ahead, I would just like to acknowledge and pay my gratitude to all my teachers, many of them who are actually viewing me today, for grooming me into the professional I am today. I acknowledge my institute, my alma mater, Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Physiotherapy, where I still continue as a lifelong learner. I am grateful to the GSMC Femur Regional Institute for initiating me into medical education. This was almost a decade ago now, and to the Institute of Medical Education Technology and Teachers Training for nurturing within me the science and the art of teaching. So before we move ahead, I have a very small request, a small pre-test for all of you. So I am sharing the link of this pre-test on our WhatsApp group as well as the chat. So I request all of you to please just take a few minutes and fill up this pre-test form. And then we'll also be having a post-test. So that will help us analyze actually the effect and learning which will happen as a result of this webinar. So requesting all of you to please fill up the pre-test. We will wait for everyone to do this a couple of minutes, 2 minutes maybe.
Yes. Yeah, audio fun is it? And this is because turn off the
Okay, so if all of you have filled up the pre-test, let's move ahead with the session today. So the objectives of today's session are that by the end of the session, we will be able to review the traditional performance assessment methods. We will introduce a few newer methods of performance assessment, and one of them being OSCE. We will discuss the steps required to set up an OSCE and an OSPE. We will discuss the advantages and challenges of this OSCE and OSPE method of assessment and try to appreciate that OSCE can assess the shows how competencies. So this is the Miller's pyramid. I'm sure most of you have already seen it. So this is just to reinforce the fact that any knowledge or any clinical competence will at the foundation has the knowledge, which is the knows, and the knows how, which is the interpretation and application of knowledge, followed by the demonstration of learning, and in the shows and the does domain. So the shows and does are actually the performance assessment levels, whereas knows and the knows how are the knowledge levels. And this happens across all the three domains, right from knowledge, which is cognitive domain, psychomotor domain of skills, and the affective domain, which is attitude. So as one grows, as a student grows from a novice to becoming an expert, the professional authenticity is demonstrated by assessing the students across all these domains, which is knowledge, knows how, shows how, and does. So it is at this performance assessment level where all our performance assessment, the practical, the long case, the short case, all these methods which we are traditionally doing come into place, as well as the OSCE, which is coming at this level, and we'll be talking more about this now. So we are all familiar with the traditional performance assessment methods. We have our long case, the short case, the oral examinations again, which are a part of the practical exams. The long case, the advantage is that there is an integrated in-depth assessment of the clinical competencies which happen in a realistic setting. However, the limitations include the lack of structure, limited observation of clinical skills, and the narrow sampling of the content. Each also there is lack of uniformity because each student is getting a different case, and also there is a poor inter-case reliability. Coming to the Viva exam, again there is an integrated in-depth assessment, but again similar to the long case and short case, there is a face-to-face. The limitations include the lack of structure. It tests the cognition. It is biased by communication skills. There is a narrowing of the sampling of the content, and again each student gets different questions, so there is non-uniformity leading to again reduced reliability. So thus the issues with the traditional methods of performance assessment include the subjectivity to it. They tend to be unstructured. There is always an inadequate sampling because the students just are given one or two cases and that's it. And therefore they are not real tests of performance because a lot of emphasis is still given on the cognitive domain. Also, there are issues related to the reliability and the validity. So coming to the newer performance assessment methods, we have quite a few of them. This is the entire list where we have OSCE and OSPE. We have clinical evaluation exercise. We have mini clinical evaluation exercise. We have portfolios. We have direct observation of procedural skills, a 360-degree evaluation or a multi-source feedback. So all these are essentially checklists based assessments where the students are performed doing the procedure themselves, and then they are assessed and feedback is given. Now amongst all these, OSCE and OSPE are the methods which assess students in the shows how level on the Miller's pyramid, whereas all the other assessments are assessing students in the real life setting at the does level. So coming to OSCE or OSPE as it is, so what do these stand for? I'm sure all of us have heard these terms and we are aware. OSCE stands for Objective Structured Clinical Examination, whereas OSPE stands for Objective Structured Practical Examination. So the difference between the two is essentially one is clinical based with the patients, the other would be practical based, practical small skills more at the lower levels of learning, first year, second year. The OSCE can be used for the higher level of students, final years, interns, and the postgraduates. So what is an OSCE? An OSCE is an assessment format in which the candidates rotate around a circuit of stations, and at each of which a specific task has to be performed, which usually involves a clinical skill such as history taking or an examination. This was first introduced by Ronald Harden in the University of Dundee in the year 1979, and after that a lot of people have used it. There is so much literature already available on in the field of medical education related to OSCE. This is a photograph of an actual OSCE station taking place. The reference is there in front of you. So as you can see, there are multiple stations. The students have to move around a circuit of stations which are arranged. Each station is numbered. And at every station, there are some instructions kept. The students have to read the instructions, and then go inside and perform the task. There would be some stations which are rest stations in between. There can be such multiple rest stations after every 2 or 3 stations where the students can take a pause and have a break. Some stations might not have examiners, they might just have some interpretation of some reports. There will be an entire team in the people of sitting in the center who would be managing the OSCE, managing the availability of resources, the timelines. So all these things were taken care of by a separate team. So how do we set up an OSCE? Last week we have had an entire webinar on blueprinting where Bhavna madam spoke quite a lot about that. So yes, we need to have a blueprint to start with. This blueprint will help us determine what needs to be assessed, what should be assessed, and this will again come from what is the level of the learner, whether it's an undergraduate or a postgraduate, and based on that, the depth of the assessment needs to be decided. The next step would be deciding the stations. So whatever clinical tasks we want to assess, they should align with the learning objectives of the course and the candidate's level of learning. For every station, we need to prepare the checklists, and the marking scheme for each station is also structured and determined in advance. So this checklist needs to be created by your expert faculty team prior to the exam. A consensus needs to be developed on what should be the content of the checklist and what should be the weightage for every point within the checklist. Next is we need to select our patients, either a real patient or a standardized patient. If we are using standardized patients, they need to be trained. We will talk about that in detail as well. The next important aspect is examiner training, because the examiners are finally going to mark the students based on a checklist. The examiners really don't need to ask any questions to the students. They have to just observe the student who is performing. This makes it difficult for many examiners because we are tuned or accustomed to asking questions to the students. But ideally, in the case of an OSCE or an OSPE, we are supposed to leave the student free to perform whatever he wishes to perform and just observe and then assess the student on the checklist. Unless the student is doing something grossly wrong which might harm the patient, we can then intervene, but otherwise we should leave the student free to perform. And the student also knows that the student will not be asked any questions. So this kind of reduces the anxiety of the student as well, that whatever I do, I'm not going to have a viva over here, and that probably helps or makes an impact on the performance of the student. The practical arrangements need to be made well in advance, and the marking scheme is structured and determined again in advance. So now let us just see all these points in a little bit more detail. So talking about blueprints, we can have multiple. This is just an example of a few OSCE stations which we can have across different systems. There can be some stations on history taking. There can be some stations found on examination of a particular skill. There can be some station on demonstration of a particular procedure. There can be a separate station on counseling. And so we have to determine what are going to be our OSCE stations for a particular exam. And based on this blueprint, the checklist also needs to be prepared, and this set of instructions for the students, the set of instructions for the examiner, all will be prepared according to this. But this is a starting point where we decide right from the beginning that this is what a particular group or a batch of students is going to be assessed on. This will help bring about uniformity of the assessment as well, because then all the students will give the practical exam across all these competencies in a uniform way. The next step are instructions for the examiners and instructions for the students, and they should be prominently displayed. So the examiner should be aware of what they need to be assessing or observing the students on. The students need to be aware of what they have to perform and on what they are going to be assessed. And these should be informed prominently. Even right outside the station, the students' instructions should be displayed. So let us see a few examples. This is an example of an OSCE station, and these are the instructions for the examiners. So here they are. This can be just one station where the examiners are instructed to go through the checklist and observe the student taking the history of a standardized patient. And then they are supposed to observe the history taking skills as well as the communication skills. Now for this same station, this can be the instructions for the students. So the student will come in. Before entering into the OSCE station, the student has to read these set of instructions and accordingly go in and perform the test. So it's made very clear to the student that what the student is supposed to do and what he is going to be assessed on. The time frame for every station is also decided. So after the time is over, the bell will ring, the student will stop and move on to the next station, and another student will come in place of the student. So that's how the circuit will keep on rotating, and every student will attempt multiple stations and will be assessed across multiple competencies. So coming to the next step of writing the stations. So patient scenario needs to be created, and either a real patient or a simulated patient can be used depending on the details of the case. Now the length of the station should be adequate to the time which we are going to give for the station. For example, if the total time allotted for the students is going to be 10 minutes, accordingly the station and the scenario needs to be created, and this should be done well in advance of the examination date so that a small trial can be done and any lacunae can be corrected based on the feedback received. Coming to the checklists. So for every station, we need to make a checklist. This will be based on the skills which are to be tested for that particular station. So we need to identify what are the critical elements of that particular station which the students need to perform, and based on which we will decide whether the performance was good or not. So for every sub point, every task, the options can be either whether the student has done it, not done it, or whether he has done it but he needs improvement. Also, the marking station for every task can also be decided, the marking schedule, based on the importance of the skills which are supposed to be tested. We will see this with the help of an example. The sequence of tasks should follow a logical manner, and there should be space for comments, particularly if we are going to use this during our formative assessment for giving feedback to the student. So we can actually write what the student did and did not do, or whether he did well. All those feedbacks, constructive feedback, can also be given to the students in the same form. An important point to keep in mind regarding the checklist is that what are we actually going to assess? And this will depend on what is been the curriculum and what is the level of the learner. So for example, it might be a history taking station, but the points of your checklist would be totally different if the learner is an undergraduate student or if the learner is a postgraduate student. So this will ultimately help contribute to the validity of the entire assessment as well. A few examples of an OSCE station. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Tushar Palekar for permitting to share these. These were a part of his project which was done on OSCE. So these are just a few examples of stations. This is one station from our physiotherapy aspect where we want the students to assess the grade of tightness. And the students are informed on what they are going to be communicated. And then we can have a detailed checklist about what the student has done, how he has performed, each and every individual task which we expect the student to do during the exam is listed out. So we know whether the student is doing it. If he is not doing it, we cannot know, and accordingly give a score. Now, depending on the weightage or the importance of a particular topic, we might determine the individual weightage which is to be given for every task or not. So depending on the importance of the task, the weightage or the score can accordingly be also determined. Another example of performing an individual muscle testing for a specific muscle. So again, we have listed out all the individual steps, the small tasks which the student needs to do for performing that particular procedure, and he is directly being observed first hand whether the student is performing these tasks or not. Usually, otherwise, what happens in the traditional format of assessment is that a task is given to the student, he performs it, and then the examiner comes at the last moment. So the examiner has actually not got the opportunity to observe the student first hand, how he has interacted with the patient, how he has handled the patient, how he has performed the task. So this is an opportunity where the examiner also gets to see firsthand what the students are doing and how they are performing. So it's possible even in our physiotherapy curriculum, in our topics, in our subjects, to create checklists like these to help assess the students. This will also help us to give a structured feedback to the students at the end of the exam. So we can very specifically pinpoint and give them feedback as to what they did well as what needs improvisation or which area could have been focused on better. Next step is the patient selection. So as we mentioned, real patients can be used to test clinical skills. However, the challenge with real patients is that it's difficult to keep a real patient for the same skill and allowing the patient to be assessed by numerous students. It's kind of unethical as well. So we cannot permit the same patient to be examined by say 50, 60 and the large volume of students which we are dealing at a go. Also, so an option can be to find out or select multiple patients, but then the difficulty or the challenge would lie in finding multiple patients with similar findings. So in order to take care of that challenge, we can train standardized patients to act as patients. They are basically actors who will behave like a patient, and the examiner will be observing the student interact with this standardized patient. So what exactly is a standardized patient? A standardized patient is an individual trained to portray a specific patient case in a consistent manner. So this standardized patient will be giving the same history, the same examination, the same finding to every student who is going to come after every 10 minutes. And during an interaction with the student, this standardized patient will present this case history in response to questioning by the student. So this is important because the standardized patient is trained to answer only to what queries the student asks. Otherwise, what happens over a period of time is that the real patients also tend to leak out answers to the students. The patients themselves at times are aware of what the questions the examiners are asking if he has been assessed multiple times. So over here, the standardized patient is specifically trained and instructed to answer only those questions which are asked by the student. The standardized patient can also simulate a number of clinical signs, that is loss of visual field, localized abdominal pain. So they can also be elicited by the standardized patient, and they need to be trained essentially for this task. The next aspect is the practical arrangements which we need to do. So yes, we already talked about these clear instructions to the candidates as well as examiners. So prior orientation lectures are advised for the examiners so that they are aware about how to take the exam and the list of equipments which are required for every station. Coming to the examiner training, so the examiner should be aware of the principles and the purposes of how OSCE is to be taken. The role of the examiner should be clear, as we mentioned earlier, that they are just going to observe the student. Unless required, don't ask any questions to the student. We have to just observe the student and assess him based on the checklist using the standard procedure which is followed. There can be some stations which are video recorded, and later on the examiner can view the performance on the video and then grade the student. Although this has its own set of challenges in our settings, but yes, video recordings can also be done. So with this, what are the advantages of an OSCE? So can we just take a minute to kind of think about what we have already gone through the presentation of what exactly an OSCE is. So what do you feel? Is it advantageous? Is it useful? So can we have your comments on the chat box or on the WhatsApp group, please? Can we just take half a minute to put down your thoughts? I request all of you to put down what advantage do you feel OSCE has. Do we have the comments coming in? Okay, so we do have a couple of comments. Yes. So the advantages of OSCE, it's an objective methods of assessment as it's there in the name. It is a structured format where the case is clear. All the students are examined across the same uniform cases. Therefore, there tends to be a high reliability because of the checklist. The students are graded either on what they are performing and not performing, and that is assessed with the help of a checklist. So the reliability is relatively high. But at the same time, the checklist helps in reducing the bias. We have your comments coming up. Students can perform without any hindrances. Yes, because they know that whatever they do, they are not going to be interrupted by the examiner. Students' anxiety can be minimized. Yes, it leads to a stress-free environment. So thank you for all your comments which are coming up. Time saving. If you can see, in a span of say 1 hour or so, if we have an OSCE, if we have planned a OSCE for 6 stations and there are 10 minutes for every station, in 1 hour we can assess around 6 to 7 students across so many competencies. And if we have a batch of around say 30 students, in one day itself, in the morning and afternoon session, all these 30 students can be assessed across different competencies in with a multiple larger sampling. So otherwise the conventional exam which we do, it goes on for days and days altogether. But in a shorter duration of time, we can assess students, so that it is time saving as well. This is a very good method for assessing the students on the affective domain, because over here we have an opportunity of directly observing how they are interacting firsthand, how they are behaving with the students, how they are communicating, how they are talking with the patients. So a direct observation is possible and we can assess the students on the affective domain. The checklist helps to ensure that no points are missed out. The checklist also helps in documentation, which is a very important aspect. So whatever we are grading the student on, or whatever scores we are giving, we have a documentation of why we have graded that student. So that's a very important point. So along with assessment of learning, there is also an assessment as learning which is being used. So now we can use this OSCE checklist during, for giving feedback to the students as well. If we are using it as a end posting exam, the students can be given feedback based on the checklist, and that will help them learn as well. So OSCE is not only just assessment of learning, but it can also be used for the purpose of learning itself. And all these points will finally help improve the validity and reliability of the assessment as a whole, because we are bringing about objectivity, uniformity in the assessment, we are making it structured, reducing the bias, and all these points will contribute to improving the validity, something which is missing in the traditional assessment methods. We have had a few comments coming up on the challenges also. Yes, there are definitely a lot of challenges. So can you just take a minute to put down your points on the challenges? Many of you have already given your points. So what are the challenges of implementing OSCE? Suppose now if we are asked to conduct our next examination using an OSCE format, what challenges do you foresee in your setup? Yes, it does require a lot of preparations, more manpower. It is definitely time consuming, requires prior preparations. It can become monotonous for the examiner. Okay. So yes, it is resource intensive. We need to create the checklists. We need to validate them. We need to prepare the stations. The availability of the patients is going to be a challenge. Let it be a real patient or a standardized patient who then otherwise need to be trained. The availability of examiners and then training them for OSCE. So in our conventional examination format, we just have 1 or 2 examiners who conduct the exam for the entire batch of students. Over here, if there are multiple stations, if you're having say 6 to 10 stations, and if we need to have say 1 or 2 examiners for every station, from where do we get so many examiners? So that is definitely an important challenge which does exist with OSCE, but then we need to think about who can be examiners. If it's just going to be checklist based, do we have other alternatives for who can be examiners? Maybe we can discuss this during the question and answer round as well. The supporting manpower for conducting the exam, and some people often say that OSCE is not an exam in a real life performance. It's being done in a simulated or an artificial setting. So yes, but rather than calling it as a disadvantage, that's the point which we had already emphasized on, that OSCE is going to assess the students on the shows how domain. So if we as examiners, we as teachers are confident that the student is able to perform well in an artificial setup, won't it give us more confidence to allow the students to perform in a real life scenario on real patients at the DUS level? So yes, OSCE is definitely an artificial setting, but it gives us more confidence as examiners, as teachers, to allow the students to handle the patients directly, and it would give the students confidence themselves to handle a real life patient. So finally, with this set of challenges, they will exist. What we can only advise and recommend is that please conduct it within your institutes, do a small pilot for the feasibility and try to identify what challenges you're facing. And accordingly, you'll have to find out the solution for those as well. So in summary, how to conduct an OSCE? These are the steps which we need to keep in mind. Create a proper blueprint. We need to write our station material and accordingly prepare the checklist. Select our patients and train them, either real or standardized patients. We need to train the examiners and make the practical arrangements. So the take home message is that all assessment methods have their own advantages and their limitations. No single method can assess all types of knowledge and skills, and therefore multiple methods are recommended. So OSCE is just one of the newer tools of assessment which we can try to use and adopt and implement. That doesn't mean we should do away with our traditional methods. They also have their own advantages and importance. It's not about throwing away the old, but it's about what new we can already imbibe and incorporate into the entire holistic pattern of assessment. So thank you everyone, and I will again, before we have the question answer round, I will just request you all to fill up the post test as well. I'll just share the link on the group. So I've posted the post test link on the group as well, requesting you all to kindly fill up the post test. And over to the organizers, please. Yeah.
Okay, before we start with question answer session, let's give some 2 minutes to answer the post test. And we will have a question answer session.
Dr. Gaurang, sir, we have a question. Can you suggest how we conduct this online during lockdown using stimulated case?
Yes, so virtual OSCEs are a trend which are coming up, especially during this lockdown period. So we again, depending on what we want to assess, we would need to have a checklist based on that and accordingly decide what task we can ask the student to perform online. If the student is at a remote place, I'm not. We need to think about what and how he can show a particular procedure which we want to assess for the student. So if it is a small clinical skill, the student can come through video conferencing and we can assess, give him the task and he can and observe the student performing. The students will have to make arrangements for demonstrating us the task or the procedure or the skill.
Yes. So we have one more question. Are
Yes, please.
rubrics a necessary requirement for OSCE?
Rubrics is basically a plan of assessment. So when we are making the authentication, when we are creating the checklist, when we are defining the scoring pattern to be given, that essentially is the rubric which we are preparing. So that is helping us to create and execute the checklist at the same time, execute the exam. So yes, it's a part of the process. It's not something in isolation. Okay, I can see the next question. Who would be giving training to the teachers? Well, so I think many of the teachers have already undergone the basic training in the medical education technology workshops. But then at the acute level, those of us who have had basic and advanced training can take up the initiative and train your fellow colleagues within the institutes. And this is something that needs to be done. Unless you do it, the challenges and the feasibility also of doing it won't come up. So it's a process which we need to adopt, and gradually it will come into the system.
Do we have any more questions? How to prepare a checklist and how many points it can have? The question.
So how to prepare a checklist? Depending on the task or the procedure which we want students to perform, we would already have a preset in our mind at what is the student supposed to perform for a particular task. So we need to list down those minor steps, and those will become the forms of our checklist. It can be the positioning of the patient, it can be the handling of the patient, it can be the again positioning of the patient, it can be the so all the small things which we usually check during a practical exam, they need to be just listed out in the form of a checklist. How many points it can have, there is no standard criteria to this, but then again, it all depends on what is the level of the learner and what are we trying to assess. Can we have a small example on this patient history taking of a patient? Okay, so for history taking, what are the points which we usually ask? We ask the student about the onset of the problem. We expect the student to ask the patient about the onset of the problem, since when it is painful, what is the site of pain, what was the past history and present history. So all these points in the history can be taken up as the checklist points. How can we differentiate the checklist for an postgraduate or an undergraduate student? Okay, so as we know, this same history which I just mentioned can be for a undergraduate, but at the postgraduate level, it is already expected that he knows all this. So maybe we might want to focus more in depth about the particular condition of concern, whether he is going into history. So whatever is the level of the learning which we, and the depth of knowledge which we need to assess, those would be the questions which we would expect from the student. How should we decide the result of the student? On the checklist, if we have given a score to each of these points, we can decide a minimum cutoff score based on what the student has done or hasn't done, and accordingly decide whether to what should be the result.
What kind of examination can prepare a student in future when he is the assessor?
I am not understanding this question clearly. What kind of examination can prepare a student in future when he assesses a patient? Will this kind of, so I think this examination, if at the end of the exam feedback is given to the students will know that where he has performed well, which are the areas where the student needs improvement. So this will be helpful to the student in the future as well. That is the question which was asked. Is this the job of a single person? Obviously, definitely not. It's a team effort. In fact, no exam is the job of a single individual. Let it be an OSCE or any other method of assessment. It should always be a group effort, a teamwork. Do we need to change the standardized patient again and again? Yes, if we have sufficient number of people to be standardized patients, they can be replaced. They can be given breaks in between. So somebody had posted a question about monotony. So if being in that role is becoming too monotonous for the standardized patient as well, the standardized patients can be interchanging roles as well. So that's possible. How can the marking is done? Marking is done. The marking scheme has to be decided prior based on the checklist.
Do they require socialized training and which give them training? I think it means, and who will give them training?
Given our scenario, we have to only start training ourselves, and so it's not about who will give them training. We should think about whom can we train to be standardized patients in our scenario. Because in countries abroad and in places where all this started, they are having professional doctors who are trained and paid to be standardized. But in our setup, we can. Yes, I think Ramit ma'am, you want to say something? Yes, ma'am, please.
I think we need to wait till university makes it compulsory for us as a part of internal assessment examination or university examination, and then university can start giving us the training. Or there is other way out that it can be taken up as by an individual teacher out of their own interest to learn something new and to do something for the students. So it is out of one's interest. Institute can take the initiative of training their own teacher. So either or, wait for the university to take the lead, or the teachers or the institutes can themselves take a lead in trying out this particular method.
So to add to that, ma'am, so yes, the universities can and will and should take the lead, but whenever that happens, the teachers, we should be prepared and ready for it. So this is the job which needs to start from the grassroots level as well, that the teachers need to be trained, and yes, the policies will come when they will have to come. But the policy makers will also find it difficult to implement it if the people are not trained. So it has to happen from both ends.
So let's start from our end.
Yes.
Okay. So,
Hello.
yes.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
Maheshwari.
Ma'am, I have one question. Can we show this checklist to the student prior the exam?
No, the purpose of creating the checklist is not to show them because it's like leaking out the question paper. But during so these are ideally we should have over a period of time create checklists, and once we have a checklist question bank, then these can be used during our teaching phase as well. So we can use these checklists to train the students, but then at the time of the exam, don't formally show them that this is the checklist and this is what you're going to do.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's all. There are no further questions.
Yeah. Now I'll just move on to vote of thanks. Thank you so much, Dr. Gaurang Bakshi sir, for enlightening us with his knowledge and experience. Thank you to all respected teachers for your presence. Thank you to Maharashtra State Coordinator, Dr. Suvarna Garbit ma'am, and State Joint Coordinator, Dr. Snehal Patel, for guiding us and helping us whenever needed. Thank you, our Zonal Head, Dr. Pooja Kamble, and National Head, Dr. Ruchi Bashi, for your faith on us. Thank you, Dr. Uttara Mohan, Dr. Priya Karande, and Dr. Nirali Sangvi for always being there to support us. If everyone if everyone still has any questions, please feel free to put it on the WhatsApp group, requesting you all to put your feedback on the link given in the chat box. Thank you so much. Great day ahead to everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. The Thane branch of the IIT Women's Health. Thank you for organizing this and inviting me to discuss.
Thank you, sir.